Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Backlog Bunker. This week, I played more Pokemon, but a different one this time, because I got tired of waiting to play Alpha Sapphire, and not really that much else, but we'll get to that. So yeah, I played Pokemon Y, or while I'm playing Pokemon Y, because like I said, I got tired of waiting for Alpha Sapphire, because I'm not going to be able to do that until I go home. And despite the fact that Gen 6 was my first experience with any of the Pokemon games, it's unfortunate that I don't like it as much now anymore, but it's not really surprising. Partially because of all the things I mentioned last week about, general Pokemon issues, but also because Gen 6 is just kind of lame. It very much feels like an experimental Pokemon game because it was the first 3D one, or the first mainline 3D one, and so it was like, okay, let's just make a kind of lame and shitty Pokemon game as our first foray into the mainline 3D. The only problem with it is that they made that, V Gen 6, as opposed to, like, doing the Gen 3 remakes first, and then maybe having the actual Gen 6 be Kalos, or maybe just skipping Kalos altogether and doing Alola, or having Kalos be like a spin-off game where it's not a full mainline title with its own like league and stuff, but it's a combination of all the other series. Really, I'm starting to think that anything would have been better than what we got, because every game after Gen 6, with the exception of the Switch games that I haven't played, or even the one that I did that was just really bad, were better at doing what Gen 6 did than Gen 6. And like, so much in this game feels like they had a bunch of ideas they put on a dartboard, and they threw darts at that dartboard to pick ideas, and they did not fully flesh out any of them. They just threw in whatever came to their heads, and then put like half of it in the game. Having a unique wild battle that gives you a higher chance to find hidden abilities is a really cool idea. The only problem is that they did it by implementing horde battles, and horde battles aren't fun. Sky battles are not bad in concept, because you know what one of the most fun game modes in Pokemon Showdown is? Monotype. And sky battles are just monotype, but there's only flying. I think maybe a much better idea would have been to have one monotype trainer on every route throughout the region, and then, if you have enough Pokemon of that type, you can go fight that trainer. Which, hey, that might be an actual reason to have a bunch of non-Kalos Pokemon on your team. Speaking of, the brand new Pokedex only having like 50 Pokemon in it, which is fucking insane because you can't even find a lot of these very easily. I knew I wanted to add Inkay to my team because it's one of my favorite Pokemon, or Malamar's one of my favorite Pokemon, and so I wanted to add it to my team, but on the route that you can find it on, it's competing with 7 other Pokemon on that route that are all from previous generations, and the encounter rate for Inkay itself is lower than a lot of those Pokemon. Had I been playing the game completely normally, like I wasn't looking for a specific Pokemon, I went through like 20 encounters before I found Inkay. It would not be surprising to me if most people, when going through this game their first time through, didn't even find half of the Kalos Pokemon. And what makes this worse is that I'm coming directly off of having played Pokemon White, in which the distinctive thing about Gen 5 is that they make you use all the brand new Pokemon before you even touch anything else. And I thought that was really cool because it makes Gen 5 feel like its own region. It has its own selection of Pokemon that you find and go on an adventure with, and then, when you want to play more of it, you can get all the other guys or trade them to yourself from other games. It's kind of weird to look at the rest of the series now and realize that most of the rest of them don't do this. Especially since as the games go on, a lot of their exclusive Pokemon get really, really interesting. Gen 7 is probably my favorite selection of brand new Pokemon across the entire series, and, well, it doesn't do the Gen 5 thing. It's much, much better about it than Gen 6 is, but still. So yeah, another thing that contributes to this feeling like half a Pokemon game is that it feels like there's only half a Pokedex. But of course, they spent a lot of development time on Mega Evolutions, the brand new gimmick for this region specifically, and no Gen 6 Pokemon can use it in this game. Now from a certain perspective, I get this. The whole idea behind Mega Evolution is that it's supposed to be further evolution. You would want to give this to Pokemon that people are already familiar with from across the series. As stupid as the Gen 1 pandering is, I do understand them giving you a Gen 1 Pokemon to Mega Evolve, because Charizard, Venusaur, and Blastoise are probably the most famous third stage evolutions across the entire franchise. Never forget, Gen 1 did not have any legendaries on the boxes, neither the originals or Fire Red and Leaf Green. They had the final stages of the starters. But, having said all of that, literally 0 new Pokemon get Mega Evolutions? None of them at all? Not the starters, not the legendaries, not a fairy type, not even a fucking bug or bird, the staples of 3-stage evolutions. And then we dedicate an entire section of the game to showing off Mega Evolution, and it's fucking Lucario? And then, God, on top of all of that, even if you wanted to use Mega Evolution exclusively on older Pokemon, which, you only can, you don't get to do that for the vast, vast, vast majority of them until the end game. Or, sorry, no, not the end game, the post game. Aside from Lucario and whichever Gen 1 starter you chose, which are given to you earlier in the game, the only Mega Evolutions that you can get throughout the game are Gengar, Aerodactyl, Ampharos, and Abomasnow. 4 fucking Pokemon, most of which you won't even have in your party until late into the game, because I'm halfway through the game right now, and I don't have any of these Pokemon. I've never even seen them. You don't even find a Abomasnow until you're late into the 8th gym. So even if you don't give a shit at all about new Pokemon, and you just want to use a party of your old favorites, especially the ones that can Mega Evolve, you won't even be able to use most of them unless you've already beaten the game. Did they forget to put most of the Mega Stones in? It's things like this that make me feel like Gen 6 is half of a game, because what do you mean your brand new gimmick isn't even usable for most of the game? I know it's very interesting to talk about Pokemon Y like this after I just came off of talking about Pokemon White that I didn't like, but it's more of a dichotomy between the two, where Pokemon White did all the things that a Pokemon game should do. It is a very good Pokemon game, but as a video game, I thought it was boring and not very fun. But Pokemon Y, on the other hand, does a lot of things as a video game correctly. It makes a lot of quality of life changes that are just far better than Pokemon White. The bike by itself is just better to use in Y than White. But it does all the Pokemon things wrong. So as a fan of video games, I like Pokemon Y more, but as someone who is trying to understand the appeal of Pokemon, I think White did a much better job at trying to convey that to me. But speaking of trying to understand things, the other thing that I quote-unquote played this week was Dispatch, which is why I said earlier that I didn't really play anything other than Pokemon this week, because I barely consider Dispatch a game. I'm sure a lot of people know how I feel about visual novels at this point, but as a reminder, I don't really consider them games because they don't really have any gameplay. At best, there are stories with gameplay elements, and that second part isn't even always true. To give some props to Dispatch, I consider it to be on the Danganronpa tier of visual novels, which one day I should make an actual tier list for that, but as of right now, the Danganronpa tier is basically games that have enough gameplay for me to be engaged. However, if this is a tier based on Danganronpa, Danganronpa is all the way at the top of that tier, and Dispatch is probably all the way at the bottom. Danganronpa has gameplay in basically every sense of the word. Gameplay you have to act on, and gameplay you have to think about. Dispatch has gameplay you have to think about, a little bit, and not really much else. Doing the actual dispatch part of Dispatch really just means picking the heroes that have the numbers that you want. Beyond that, there really isn't much gameplay to speak of, because like, yeah, you have to think about what heroes you want to send at what times, because sending a hero on one mission, that like, if they're really good at mobility, if another situation comes up that also needs mobility, you won't have that hero. But not only is that scenario itself pretty rare, but even when it does come up, it doesn't really matter all that much, because the whole point of the numbers is that it gives you a better chance at getting a success for the mission. But sending someone with low numbers does not mean an automatic fail, it just means that your chances of succeeding are lower, and a lot of the time, those low chances didn't really matter all that much. Then the rest of the game is just a telltale like choose your own adventure, with the whole pop-up saying this person will remember that and everything. And I like the story, like with most visual novels that I play, but again, it's the game part of the game that I care about. And with the exception of Detroit Become Human, most visual novels hook me with their story. It's not very hard to do. Hell, even in Detroit's case, I was interested in the story, I just don't think it's very good or take it very seriously. And to make a bold prediction right now, I'm going to say that I'm probably gonna like the story. However, I will be giving the stink eye to everybody who calls this game peak, including the friend who had me play it, because I'm seriously missing the game part of my video game. And as for the weekly topic this week, again, it's not really a question or even really a discussion point, but more whinging about the gaming industry from me. Because lo and behold, GTA 6 has gotten delayed in the midst of Rockstar having employee trouble, and by employee trouble, I mean union busting. And call me petty, but I kinda want GTA 6 to flop hard, because there needs to be a big game that's made an example of for the rest of the industry, to understand that these games cannot get more expensive to make. You gotta stop doing it. Because the funny thing about when a union gets formed is that even if the union is resolved peacefully, that does not mean the conditions got meaningfully better, that just means they got better enough for people to continue working there. And the last thing I want to hear about an industry that I want to get into is, yeah, that shit sucks, but it's a living. Is it not just a little bit insane that Nintendo, which has famously, for the last like 20 years, been the low-level console, is claiming that dev times are just too long and too hard to not justify $70 or $80 games? Nintendo has some of the most expensive games that are out there right now, when they have been making the, on the hardware side, lowest quality games of the big three for longer than I've been alive. Nintendo was weak but unique among the big three ever since the GameCube, where, you know, they got beaten the fuck out by both Xbox and PlayStation. And now, in the current generation, where they are still, again on the hardware side, being beaten out by Xbox and PlayStation, they have the most expensive games? Excuse me? I may not think it's right for a PlayStation game to be $70, but at least the people who are buying PlayStation games for $70, they know that what they're paying for is having 52 billion polygons in Kratos' beard hair. But then Nintendo is putting out shit like Pokemon Legends ZA and looks you dead in the eyes and goes, 70, right? Sakurai, I probably love you more than Jesus Christ, and it was awesome that you went, hey, no DLC in a direct. But Kirby Air Riders for $70? Really? How is it that games keep getting more expensive for us the consumer when the technology keeps getting better, when the arms race keeps going? When's the bubble gonna pop? When we start using AI in games and draining the world of all its fucking energy? Which, by the way, I found out like 5 minutes before I started recording this that Call of Duty 7 was using AI in, well, apparently uses AI in its campaign or whatever. We live in a fucking clown world. I've said it before and I'll say it again. I do not necessarily want the industry to crash. However, if the industry were to crash, I wouldn't mind it all that much, especially if we got things that were better after it. If the industry crashing means that I won't get things like Kingdom Hearts 4 for a long time, I would rather have that than potentially get a Kingdom Hearts 4 made by 30% AI workers or whatever the fuck is going on at Square Enix. For as much as I shit on Sonic for, well, everything, the most recent game that I've actually bought was Sonic X Shadow Generations. That was the last game that I bought for full price. Forgive me for not being so optimistic about an industry that only managed to get me to pull out my wallet for full price for a game that was a remaster of a game I already liked that came out in 2011. That's it this week. Get out of here.